Hello, everyone, and welcome to CovYouth 101. As you may know, but if you don't, I encourage you to check them out. We have been putting together webinars for Covenant Youth Ministry leaders this whole year, focusing on the kind of 101 skills and proficiencies that we really see are essential for a youth leader to thrive in ministry for a long time. This is, I think, our 10th one, maybe our 11th one. And so we've had a really good year of knocking these out. And we really intend this to be like a long-standing resource for our youth ministry leaders. So you're probably watching this today as a recording. And I would encourage you to check out the other recordings. They're available on CovYouth 101. And if you want to find the others, just look for the tab that says basic training and you'll see CovYouth 101 under there. So we're going to get right to it today. Our topic for today is leader self-care. In my experience as a youth pastor and then as a denominational leader in both the conference and now the national level, this is one of the areas that I see youth leaders actually struggling with the most. Youth leaders are really bad at taking care of themselves. And I think it's one of the contributing factors to the statistics that show that youth ministry leaders don't tend to last very long. There are a lot of other contributors to that, but just the pace that we tend to run and the fact that there are also, most of our churches and circumstances, there aren't other people looking out for our care very well either. If we don't focus on taking care of ourselves, it just won't happen. We'll get burned out and we won't last very long. And so one of our hopes and goals for doing this CovYouth 101 webinar series is to help youth leaders to be able to flourish in ministry for a long time, to be able to find rhythms that will help them to reach sustainable ministry over the long haul. So we have a special guest today who's going to share with us about this. Her name is Michelle Bilby. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, right? I'm pretty sure. Home of the Timberwolves. We were just talking about how she has great hope for their comeback when in the basket NBA playoffs. I know Michelle because she is on the Unite East executive team as well. She'll be coming out and directing our human services there, which includes all kinds of things such as medical and counseling and just making sure that everybody there is taken care of well. And it's been really fun getting to know you over the last couple of months, Michelle. I'm looking forward to spending a week with you this summer at Unite East. But she's also been around the Covenant a long time. She's a long time leader in youth ministry. She's been a part of past chick councils, from what I understand. And so she's probably familiar to a lot of you if you've been in the Covenant for a long time. But if you're new or you're just getting to know Michelle for the first time like me, you're in for a treat today. So Michelle's going to kind of give us some tips on finding sustainable rhythms and how to take care of ourselves in youth ministry. So Michelle, I'll turn it over to you. Feel free to tell us anything more about yourself and take it away. Take it from there.
All right. Thanks, Eric, for that nice introduction. I was a youth pastor for many years, and then I went back to school and got my master's and became a therapist is the short story. So I've been practicing marriage and family therapy since about 2010, and I work with teenagers through people in their 70s, and I work with couples and families and a lot of young adults, and really enjoy that work. So self-care is a big part of what I teach. It's a big part of what I try to practice. And so I'm happy today to be talking about that with youth leaders, wherever you come from, whatever your context, and however long you've been doing youth ministry, whether it's very recently for a few days or weeks or months or many years. I think self-care, like Eric said, is always something that we want to be mindful of. And that mindful word might be something you hear a few times from me as we talk together today. So we'll dive in and talk maybe first about like what would keep us from doing self-care. Eric, you said something about like it's one of the hardest things, or it seems to be something that youth pastors and youth leaders are not doing very well, and I'm so
Mhm,
curious
mhm,
about that, and I see it a lot with my clients too. Like for some reason, it seems so simple, but we don't do it. A lot of us don't do it. So what makes it difficult to do self-care? I was kind of thinking about that as like what might be the barriers that keep us from doing it. I was thinking, one of the big things I hear is just I don't have time. I'm so
mhm,
busy. Right? We live in a busy culture, and it seems like time becomes a barrier. Um, Also, I thought about a lot of people will say, well, taking care of myself when I'm in a caregiving profession and I'm supposed to be taking care of others, it feels selfish to take care of myself. And so I feel like when I try to do that, then I struggle with my internal self. And I just feel like I'm not doing my job then for other people. So, so it just feels selfish. And I hear people wrestling with that quite a bit as well. Also, the I don't know what to do. What do I do for self care? What does that mean? And then uh, maybe I know what to do, I just don't want to do it. So, right?
mhm,
Sometimes we just are feeling a bit stubborn about taking care of
mhm,
ourselves, and
mhm,
we can think of
mhm.
about anything else to do, but taking some time for ourselves. So if those are some of the barriers for you, just know you're in good company. Those are common things that I hear and that I experience even myself, and that can all be things we can work through, right? So that's something I was thinking about. It's not about like pushing away the barriers; it's about moving through the barriers, and how do we figure out some best practices so we can get through those, maybe those harder places within us sometimes, and maybe sometimes outside of ourselves that are causing barriers. um, so best practices is another
Michelle, do you
thing.
mind if I jump
Yeah,
in
please.
that comment there? So
Yep.
I agree. I think that one of those barriers, like you mentioned it, but just to kind of enhance a little bit,
Yeah.
is I think people sometimes can feel guilty for taking time for themselves, and especially if we get into like taking like half days off or full days off, or really engaging in times of solitude and such.
Yeah.
um, those are so life-giving, so important for a leader to do. But then
Right.
you can feel guilty, like how can I do this? And it's really difficult if you work in a situation that doesn't support that. I knew a youth pastor once. He was in a part of a large church, and they kind of had like a corporate approach to their staffing, I guess.
Yeah.
And he got in trouble one time for praying at his desk during office hours.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, his supervisor literally told him, "No, that's something you do at home, not here at church," which sounds so ridiculous to say out loud, but that would really happen, and people have that kind of attitude, kind of thing. So, hopefully, you're in a place that supports that and gives you the time that you need. But please, I encourage you, don't ever feel guilty for doing the things that's going to take care of yourself, so that you can then serve for a long time.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, I would add that too. Yeah, that selfish or guilty feeling, that that those feelings can come up, and because we feel that doesn't mean we should not do self-care. And if we're in an environment that's not supporting our self-care, I kind of had that later in my in my talk, like how do we
Good,
deal with
good.
potentially
Yeah,
like toxic
that'll good.
environments,
Good.
right? Like, or
Yeah.
challenging environments that don't support our care, when we know, right, that it's something we're going to need to have longevity in the field, or even stay in it for today, right?
Right. Right.
Or
Mhm.
this week. So yeah. Um, Anything else on that, Eric?
No, sorry to interrupt. I just thought.
No, please interrupt as much
Okay.
as you
All
think
right.
would be
I will.
helpful. I love it. Um, so when we think about best practices, I guess I'm the type of person at this stage of my life. I don't need to reinvent any wheels. So I think thinking about like what are you already doing that, or what have you done in the past that maybe you stopped doing that seems to be care for self or self-care, right? I think sometimes we look at, oh, I've got to read this book or I've got to do what other people are doing, and we miss that like we are each kind of like wired in certain ways to enjoy self-care differently. And so
Hmm.
I think I just want to like bust any preconceived ideas that say you have to do it in a certain way. I think, sure, there are some templates, and you'll hear me say in a little bit, kind of some basic things that I think are helpful for everyone. But how you do the basic things, it's really important for each of us to figure out like what works best for us. The word I use is effective. What's effective
Mm-hmm.
for for me, it is going to be, different for you, Eric. It's going to be different for somebody, living in a different context or a different region of the country. There might be different opportunities for self-care in different places. And we just need to be thinking through that. So one size does not fit all with self-care, and think about what are you already doing. And this is my and to that, make it mindful. And what I mean by that, what would enhance and make it more self-care is being more mindful. And that means being present to the thing that I'm doing for self-care, being present to just that thing in the moment. So how many
Mm-hmm.
of us try to do some self-care while we're also, you know, reading, a book, or we're trying
Mm-hmm.
to like watch, I don't know, somebody's kid, and also do I don't know, something soothing for ourselves. Like we cannot do
Mm-hmm.
two things at once thinking we're going to get like the full benefits of the self-care if we're distracted kind of at the same time that we're doing that. So I think about like I like to take a mindful walk sometimes, and that means I am listening to the sounds, I'm hearing the birds, I'm hearing my feet crunching on the snow if it's in the winter, or in the summer I'm
Mm-hmm.
just hearing the different sounds of the bugs and the animals, right? Now what, I can also take a walk and I can be on my phone making a Marco Polo to a friend. That's different.
Mm-hmm.
That's keeping
Mm-hmm.
up with my relationships, and it's not self-care, or at least it's not mindful self-care in the same way. Like I can benefit from the walk, that's great, I'm not against it, go ahead and do it. But if you want to get some deeper kind of effectiveness from your self-care practices, I think making it mindful is useful. Another piece to that I would add, which is a part of mindfulness, is dropping your judgments about
Mm-hmm.
your self-care, right? This is stupid. I don't like
Mm-hmm.
taking the time for this, or I'm not doing this right. Um, this feels awkward. Why do I need to do self-care? It doesn't seem like anybody else needs to do this much self-care to feel okay with themselves. I'd really encourage trying to drop those self-judgments, which I know isn't an easy task. But the first task is noticing that I'm having judgments about my self-care, or
Mm-hmm.
about doing certain types of self-care, right? Like, oh, relaxing in a warm bath, right? Oh, that feels like only those types of people do that. Or, you know, let's drop our judgments and let's see what works for us, what's effective. If I don't add the judgments to it, might I find a deeper sense of meaning and care for myself if I'm not judging myself about it, right? And that could go back even to what Eric, you brought up earlier about the guilt and what I was saying about feeling selfish. Like I shouldn't be feeling so good about this when I'm
Mm,
supposed to be serving other people,
mm,
right?
mhm.
And here's the deal. We serve other people better when we are feeling better inside of ourselves,
Yeah.
both our mind
Mhm,
and our body.
mhm,
Which leads me to my last point about best practices is remembering the mind-body connection, that when we're doing self-care, this is for our whole being, our mind and our body. And some of us tend to be up in our minds, and that's where we're really busy, and it's hard to quiet that brain down. And so we need some self-care that helps us have some peace in our brain.
mm,
Others of us, we're really active in our body. We feel our emotions quite a bit, quite intensely, right? And our
mm,
self
mhm,
care might be needing to point at quieting or calming or soothing of some of those emotions. And I would submit that the both and of that is important for all of us. It's just
mm,
depending, knowing ourselves and maybe which direction we toggle towards. We might want to craft some self care that helps more specifically with that, but also keeping in mind that our minds and our bodies are connected and that attending to both helps the other. Does that make sense? Do you have any follow up thoughts on that, Eric?
Yeah, it does make sense. I think that's a challenge for a lot of people to make that connection, though.
Yeah.
Especially, when we talk about sometimes in our as we work out our spiritual lives,
Yeah.
we kind of fall into dualism, right? We have like a spiritual part of us and a physical part of us, and
Right.
and are they
They're
connected? Are they
disconnected.
not? Yeah, that kind of thing, and kind of easily fall into a trap of I have to pray hard enough, to fix this problem, whatever, and kind of forget that there's a whole physical side of it as well. Yeah. Um,
Exactly.
and I was, and just one of the thing, if you don't mind me mentioning,
Yeah.
back we were talking about finding the rhythm that works. Is there's also in different seasons of our lives, those will change as well.
Yes.
And because I think about like when you have children, is like probably the most obvious thing. Like what you used to take care of yourself, what you used to do to take care of yourself before you had kids, probably won't work after you
Yes.
have kids. But it's probably even more important to take care of yourself when you have kids. And I think about like when you go on like a 2-week missions trip, or people that are working at camp all summer. Your time frame just changes, and what you can do. Those situations are not what you're normal, but you still need to make a focus to be caring for yourself in those situations. Those high pressure situations are even more important to be taking care
Yes.
of. Yeah.
Yeah. And you bring up a good point that I wanted to mention too. Like, I think sometimes when we think about self care, we think, we've got to set aside, a full day, or
Mm-hmm.
it's going to back
Mm-hmm.
to the time question,
Mm-hmm.
the time
Mm-hmm.
barrier. And if we want to try to, move through that barrier, I would say, think about that self care can be 1 minute. It can be
Yeah.
1 minute
Mm-hmm.
of stepping away from our desk or from whatever we're doing, and taking some deep calming breaths, maybe doing some light stretching, right? Especially if you're, doing at your desk work one day, right? It can be, I'm gonna take a look at maybe some pleasant pictures on my phone, and just look at something that
Mm-hmm.
gives me a positive emotion for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm doing some tasks that are particularly stressful, or maybe I had just had a really stressful conversation with, my coworker, or a student, or a boss. So
Mm-hmm.
just to
Mm-hmm.
remember that, not to lock ourselves in or up because of thinking it has to be a certain amount of time in order for it to work or be effective. That, yeah, 1 minute, 5 minutes, 20 minutes, uh, finding out what works for you, and especially certain seasons of life, right? To not write off self-care because now I'm the parent of small children and I'm busy at work. It's actually,
Mm-hmm.
what can I
Mm-hmm.
do now to adjust my practices,
Mm-hmm.
to continue to do some care, even if it's right. So that's when, oh, I've got a shower. I get to take a shower. My kids are sleeping finally,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to mindfully take that shower. I'm going to really be present
Mm-hmm.
to the water just flowing down my back and my hair. And I'm going to really feel, the washcloth on my face, right? And I'm going to take some nice deep breaths and I'm
Yeah.
just going to shower. I'm not going to think about my to-do list for tomorrow. Or if I do think about it, I'm going to bring my attention back to just the way the water feels on my body. So using our five senses is what helps us if we're having a hard time staying present to our practice, right? If I'm trying to do self-care, but my brain keeps going somewhere else, use your senses, your five senses, to bring your attention back to the moment.
That's really good.
Sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and touch can be sometimes the most powerful, but you can play around with all of them. So, all right. Let's talk about navigating big events like Unite,
Mm-hmm.
which also I'm going to use that as the context, but the kind of template I'm giving is good for any type of self-care. So I was just thinking through, like, what are some of the basics of self-care that I mentioned earlier. Here they are. They're probably not going to surprise anybody, but for some reason, us humans tend to forget about them. So first of all, nutrition, right? Like, how am I feeding my body? And how am I feeding my body at a rigorous event like Unite, right? Or how am I feeding myself during a really busy week of youth ministry, where I've got multiple events and multiple things going on, right? Am I just eating McDonald's or fast food all the time? Am I drinking lots of sugary drinks and energy drinks, right? No offense to any of that. I don't have any judgments for you if that's your main diet, but you are going to do way better on a big, intense week if you are feeding your body even a little more nutritionally, and not skipping meals if you can help it, and thinking about what kinds of foods am I putting in my body. And if you have particular food intolerances or allergies and you're not minding those, you are going to feel worse in your body, right? And those of us who don't have food allergies, even just putting more, non-nutritional foods in our body, we're not going to feel as good. So if I want to have my maximum energy and maximum feeling well during a rigorous week, I'm going to want to try to eat the best I can. Hydration. I'm also going to want to drink water regularly. And some of us are really good at that. I know I might be preaching to the choir for some people on that. I see lots of people carrying their water bottles around, and that's great. I would say at Unite, we're going to, absolutely plan on bringing a water bottle. It's the middle of summer. It's the hottest time of the year for all of America, as far as I know, right? So it's going to be hot. And plan on hydrating extra, and that throughout the day, that's going to be necessary. Also, sleep. I know you might be laughing, right? Like, how am I going to get sleep at this event where it's like we're trying to stay up as long as we can? Well, there is a curfew. And we are going to try to, get people to their rooms, and that's part of my job at Unite, is to try to help people safely be in their dorms and be respectful of some of those time frames. And as the leader, how do I help myself sleep the best I can? So if you need, melatonin to help you sleep, or whatever you need to help you have the best night's sleep possible at a rigorous event, it still makes sense to be mindful of trying to get the most sleep that you can. If you don't need to be up chit-chatting with somebody, don't be up chit-chatting with somebody. Students needing to talk to you late at night, I'm going to say schedule it for the next day. Unless it's a 911 emergency kind of situation, don't stay up late talking at night. That's when the brain is most tired. Your bodies are tired. That's not the best time to have deep spiritual conversations. I would say see if you can bracket it. No offense to deep spiritual conversations, but it will go even better the following day. When you've had a good night's sleep, you'll be an even better listener if you do it the next day. So if you take medications, make sure you're taking your medications and bringing your medications or whatever it is you take. If you miss your medications, just know like you're not going to feel as good in your body. So when we're prescribed medications, make sure we're taking them as prescribed and not skipping those. Also, this also might seem like laughable about like basic needs, like making sure you're getting some activity or some exercise every day. Because a big event like Unite pretty much has it baked in, right? But for those of you who aren't going to Unite or just like thinking about best practices in life in general, right? Like building in some activity or some exercise. And by this, I like to make the point, like you don't have to go to the gym and do a workout. That's not what I'm talking about. And not everybody's wired to do that. So just what can you do with your body to keep it moving? Our bodies were made to move, which doesn't mean we have to move 24/7, but what can we do to get out and take a walk? I think at an event like Unite, sometimes maybe we also just need some time, maybe a break from the students. So if that's possible, when the students are maybe at a different activity, maybe you take some time to take a quiet walk for a little bit by yourself. Maybe you find some shade and do some stretches. Just what can you do to help your body do the best that it can on a week like Unite? And then the final thing is for just the basic needs. And this is one I kind of throw in. I don't know if everybody does, but I think about like, how are we minding our relationships? And this is not necessarily just like so much for Unite, but more broadly speaking, if we're spending all our time tending to relationships that are heavy and draining, and we're not getting with our people that fill our cup, then I think our self-care starts to wane. And I would say, think about what's the balance in your life relationally, and are you getting the time that you need with those people in your life that fill your cup? And if you don't have people in your life that do that for you, that would be an area of growth that you could think about. So those are my basics for that.
Michelle, I was chuckling to myself as you were sharing that, especially about some of those physical things. I think that youth leaders are their own worst enemies with a lot of those, kind of things. I think we sometimes adopt like a martyr complex, and we're like, oh, I'm going on this event, and I know I'm not going to get any sleep, and so they just kind of like go into it anticipating that. And then they get into it and kind of feel like now they have to live into that because that's what it means to be a really good youth leader. So if they're going to bed before 2 a.m., then they feel like they're actually not giving 100% or something like that. And I've seen many times, because I've served as like resident supervisors at events like Chick and stuff like that, where I'm encouraging people to go to bed when they're hanging out in the lobby and stuff like that. And how many times do I see clearly youth leader instigated staying up late activities? And I'm like,
yes,
you're not helping yourself. You're not helping your students. You're only making things worse. So, yeah,
that's absolutely. And it's understandable that we would feel that way. And maybe even somebody taught you that was good. And I think Eric and I are both going to say, no. that is not going to get you what you want. Like you are going to be a much more effective youth leader if you are minding those basic needs. Whether you're at a rigorous big event or just the day-to-day activities of youth ministry, that you will be longer in the field, less likely to burn out, less likely to be
less likely to be grumpy on the last day, of the night. So because you've worn yourself out the first two days.
Well, and you think about what do you want to model to your students too? Like if you want your students to get something out of the last talk on the last day, but you've kept them up every night chit-chatting, and now everyone's exhausted. Like once you hit a certain level of fatigue, there is nothing more that's going to come into your brain for learning. So if you want to make it through and you want your students to make it through, you set the tone for that. And us, as leaders, modeling that is really important. So I'm going to be the one on my human services team, probably nagging everyone at the event to try to mind their practices the best they can. So, so I just wanted to note, are we doing okay on time?
Yeah.
Eric? Okay.
Yep, we're at about 30 minutes, so we're good.
Okay, perfect. So I just had a couple of thoughts about just the challenges of ministry settings or challenging ministry settings. I feel like we've touched on those a little bit, but that was something our friend Ruby said to mention as well. But so one of the things I said was knowing our limits, knowing our limits and minding them, right? So it's one thing to know what my limit is. It's another thing to mind it, to manage it. So if I know that if I don't get enough sleep 4 or 5 days in a row, and that actually causes me to get a migraine, or it causes me to have physical symptoms that I am not going to be able to lead anymore, and I'm going to end up in medical services with Michelle and her team, right? I need to think about what is my limit on that. What can I do? And so how can I help myself get the type of sleep that I need? And if I don't, then can I find a time to take a short nap in the afternoon, right? Or in my regular role as a youth leader, right? Like how many student things can I do in a day and be a healthy human, right? How many meetings can I schedule? How much time am I spending? So knowing what our limits are, even so I was thinking of a challenging setting. If I'm having challenging conversations, right? What's my limit even within the context of a challenging conversation? Like, do I need to ask for, hey, I'm going to need to continue this tomorrow because I can't even think straight anymore. I'm so upset or I'm so tired. We're going to have to continue it at another time. So know your limits and manage it. And then also, did you have a comment?
I was just saying, that's really good. That's really good.
Yeah. Also thinking about who's on your support team, and especially in challenging ministry settings, I just want to encourage everybody to think about like who's on your team. I have a friend who's a lead pastor now because we're getting just that old, and she has myself and a couple other people who are on her prayer team. And whenever something comes up in her life and she wants prayer, she shoots us all a text, and she's just like, "Hey, pray for this," and she knows we're all gonna do it. So who's on your team? Who's supporting you? And how are you fostering that in your life? Maybe you already know people that pray for you, and just be a little more intentional about telling them, hey, here's something specifically, could you pray? And also those would be maybe the similar or same, or those could be the same people that would also encourage you. If it's different people, then have another group of people that are your encouragers, that are good with their words, and they're just telling you positives and blessing you with encouragement. Those would also be important people to have on your support team, and especially in challenging or toxic situations that you might find yourself in. And I would also encourage to have people outside of your setting that aren't in the potentially challenging or toxic setting, that might, not have like a heart connection to that place, that can be useful to have people that would be unbiased, that could support you outside of your ministry setting. And then, okay, that was my last point. And then if it truly is toxic and you've done what you can to try to, for instance, Eric, I think the example you gave of somebody wasn't allowed to pray at their desk. I can imagine maybe there's some other problems in that setting as well.
Probably, yeah.
That's happening. If truly it's a toxic or abusive situation, and you've tried to make change, at some point, I'm going to encourage you, it's time to get out. Don't keep banging your heads against the wall of toxicity. It doesn't help. It's not okay for you for the long term. And you can do all the self-care in the world. And if it's not, if it doesn't change the situation that you're in, then sometimes there is a reason, a time, and a place to think about moving on, and or to seek consultation. And that's where find a good therapist, or a spiritual director, or maybe a pastor outside of your context that you can consult with, that might help you. And I would say those are all parts of self-care, and staying in ministry for the long haul, whether the long haul is going to be for a couple of years or many, many years. So that's what I got.
I maybe add to that, if you are feeling like you're in a toxic situation, I assume most of the people watching this video are Covenant Youth Ministry leaders, to reach out to your conference leadership for some help in that situation too. We have youth ministry conference coaches in all of our conferences. And so if you don't know who your coach is, it's very easy to find that information right here on CovYouth.com. But you can also just call your conference office and just say, I need some help. Your superintendent or other people on staff would be glad to help you. Yeah.
Nice.
Michelle, I have a couple of questions for you. What would you say to someone who is saying that they are experiencing burnout? Maybe they're feeling it coming on, or they're falling in it, I don't know, whatever, but someone's just in that spot where they're just like, I just want to quit because I'm not taking care of myself. What would you say to that?
Yeah, I guess I always start with those basics that I described. Like, how are you tending to the basic needs? And I would start there. And is there anything you could do to shift or change some of that? That regardless of what happens with work, that if you're going to help yourself with burnout, that that's one thing you can do, or you can try to do. And if you've been trying those things and you're still feeling the burn of burnout, I'm completely biased, of course, but I would seek some support from a professional. Yeah. I mean, not everyone listening to this is in Minnesota. And of course, I'm not trying to make a shameless promotion of coming to see me, but I see a lot of leaders in ministry, and I think there's obviously a lot of other people in my field that do, and they really do benefit from meeting with a professional. So there's no shame in it. It's actually the strong people come to therapy. It's not weak to go to therapy or to talk to a spiritual director or a pastor.
That's good. Another question, if you don't mind, kind of the opposite, I think, on the spectrum. And this comes from, experiences I've had were mainly like older, like senior leaders. I've seen kind of criticize younger generations like millennials and Gen Z, kind of seem like they don't work hard enough because
Yeah,
there's more of a paying attention to self-care, kind of a thing. So
right.
is there such a thing as overdoing it on self-care? And how do you know if you're out of balance? Like if you're just goofing off instead of actually taking care of yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, my mind actually goes to a skill that I teach that would take probably another seminar to potentially
Okay.
explain. But
Be on the schedule.
I mean, I think that takes some self-reflection, right? Am I, am I goofing off, or am I, am I minding my care and having a balance, right? If I'm consistently not getting my work done for self-care, right, then I might have a balance that's off. And I think there might be some contextual considerations in that too. And some of our bosses maybe have different ideas about what getting our work done looks like or means. And so I guess I want to be careful with that as well. But right, how are you doing reflecting on, what is the balance? So I mean, I think you're saying like the balance is I need to care for myself. I don't want to go all or nothing, right? Like I'm all self-care and I'm barely getting my job done. I'm barely meeting with students. I'm barely getting, all the details done. I'm flying by the skin of my teeth, or I'm, working so hard. I'm so depleted. My body is breaking and my mind is sore and my emotions are hurting, right? And so how are we listening to our mind and our bodies again, right, can help us know if we're in balance or not.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, good. Thank you for everything you shared today. I think
Thanks for having me.
Really helpful for our youth ministry leaders. So you're being here today is a blessing to us. Thank you so much. Appreciate it for that.
Thank you.
I would assume that if people have further questions or would like to explore some of these ideas more, they'd be willing to contact you. If so, I'll put your information in the blog post that goes along with this recording. Okay. And then I encourage people to follow up with you. Just in how I've known Michelle, she's really open, really easy to talk to. And so if you need some support, she'd be a great person to reach out to. So thanks for being willing to do that. And thanks again for coming today. It's been a real big blessing. I forgot to mention at the top, so if you made it to the end here, I'm not Ruby. On the flyer, it shows Ruby as being the host. That's because she had to bow out today. And that's why I stepped in at the last minute, because a friend of hers who had lost her family needed some transportation to a memorial service. And so Ruby's taking care of her in that way. So that's why you're stuck with me today. But I had a lot of fun. So I'm glad for the opportunity to connect with you today, Michelle.
That's great. Thanks, Eric.
All right. Well, thank you again. And we'll go ahead and end the recording in the webinar. And I look forward to seeing you again soon. Michelle, thanks.
Okay. Take care.